Can you see my screen?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Shankar. I'm working as an integration architect with the Fox Corporation. So I today, I'd like to share my experience on how did we, achieve that operational excellence in the MuleSoft world, right? So we have, using the MuleSoft, across our Fox corporations, and we have multiple business groups, right? So I am representing one of the business group, and we have a complex business flow where we'll ingest the media requirement, then we'll take through multiple systems until from the marketing to the broadcast, right? It's a complex system which involves multiple applications. So we follow the API-led approach, right? Multi-layer API approach. We realized that uh, with the complex, um, we need to have a real operational excellence, right? Otherwise, it will be very difficult to trace the business transactions. Be given like the agility of the business, we may get uh, error from the multiple systems, right? So we need to have a proper way to monitor and alert and the triage the issue, right? So that's where we started identifying the options, and today I would like to share my experience. How did we achieve? Okay. So this is the agenda for the today's meeting. MuleSoft layer is a black box. So I just want to um, explain what actually led us, to go and create this kind of sophisticated monitoring infrastructure, and as well as the operational process. Right? Then how did we trace the business transactions, and how did we uh, achieve the logging and the error handling across this multi-layer, and how are we ticketing and alerting, right? Then we'll conclude with the question and answer session. Right. So MuleSoft plays a black box. See, as we all know, since we have a multiple audience and with various levels, I just wanted to reiterate. Um, Provided as a middleware, right? We don't have a UI, or we don't have a kind of a log file, or database logs, or file logs, where all the errors will get logged, right? So it's a being a middleware, it is very difficult to trace any errors, right, or to trace any transactions, because we don't have single point of verification mechanism, right? So it's always a challenge, um, since the middleware will integrate with the multiple applications, and the error can be originated from any application, but the error will be thrown at the MuleSoft layer, right? So based on my experience, most of the cases, whenever we see any error in the business transaction, the first point of triage is going to be always a MuleSoft layer, right? So most of the time we struggled to identify the transaction end to end. So we end up triaging for hours and hours, right? So that actually led to business incontinuity, and led to a lot of escalations, right? So then once we found out the root cause, most probably it's not a MuleSoft issue. It could be due to the data error, or it could be the issue from the target system is down, or target system is responding slowly, right? So we wanted to set up a process as well as a framework, and we wanted to use industry wide the best tools, right, to track and monitor the transactions and do the alerting, right? And basically we'll create the non-repetition, right? uh, so that's what the goal we are marching towards, right? I would like to share our experience on that front. Okay, so how did we trace the business transactions, right? So as I mentioned, we are using the API-led approach. Like we will be hearing the same explanation in many videos. Like we have experience layer and the process layer and the system layer. Um, um, the experience layer, it's frontlined to accept the request from the upstream application, and it accepts the request. Then it sends to the process layer where we have orchestration logic, or any business logic to be performed, and then system layer is the kind of acts as a proxy and to the target systems, right? So the transaction has started from the source application, and it flows through the experience and the process and the system layer, right? um, since in the MuleSoft, all three are small microservices and as a separate logging. So it is very difficult to triage and go uh, to each application log, and to find the root cause, right? So what we thought, okay, we wanted to have two-dimensional tracking, one through the technical transaction ID and another through the business transaction ID, right? So business identifier, we call that as a business identifier, right? And we need to have a mechanism to correlate the transaction that happened in the multi-layer API, right? And so for example, the transaction might have originated in the experience API. For example here, right? So we have a frame application. Excuse me. We have a frame application where the frame application will send the request to the experience layer. Then we are using the queue in between. Oh, something is causing problem. Yeah. We have a queue in between. So the experience layer will deposit the incoming request into the queue, right? Then we have a process layer which dequeue the message. Then it does the orchestration to the target applications using the system layer, right? So if you see here, we have a two transaction points, right? In the picture, we have Fox FIOE, the framework application experience layer. It collects the request and it deposits into the or queued into our anypoint MQ, and sends the acknowledgement back to the frame application. So this is the one transaction. Then the second transaction start from the process layer. It dequeues the message, and then it calls the frame system application, and it does some enrichment. Then it finally it's make a call to the graphics application, right? So to trace the whole transaction, what we are doing is we are using the correlation ID. So we actually set a standard that the correlation ID should be passed from the originating application, right? Um, so in the Mule 4, we have an option that to receive the custom ID, right? Then that can be used as a MuleSoft engine's correlation ID, right? So um, when we expose REST API, we ask the team, make sure you set the X correlation ID header. So we use that X correlation ID, and we'll propagate that to the downstream layers. Right? So we face some challenge. If it is a synchronous request, we can easily pass that through the X correlation header. But in the case of the queue-based integration, we have to propagate that correlation across the boundary of the queue, right? So what we used is the queue message property. We can create a custom property in the queue where we actually collected the correlation ID that's sent by the frame application, upstream application, and we created a custom property. And we set a standard that if any application or API which dequeues the message, it should look for that custom correlation ID, and that should be used as a correlation ID for the transaction, right? Um, then from then onwards, for any REST action, we'll be propagating the correlation ID through the X correlation ID header, right? So so we set the standard to make sure um, to propagate the correlation ID across all the layers, right? In some cases, we have a return back scenario, like it's something like asynchronous two-way pattern, where we'll ingest the correlation ID and will return back the response, right? We don't have that in the diagram, but in general cases, in that cases also, we are making sure that we'll keep track that correlation ID and will be propagating when we send the response to. In that case, we can correlate the transaction from the origin of the request till the end of the transaction, right? So this is all about the correlation ID, the technical correlation ID. In addition to that, we have a one more dimension of tracking using the business identifier, right? As we all know, in the real world scenario, very less people use the correlation ID, like the in the QA or production support or in the business wise. So whenever they are raising the issue, hey, for this particular frame number, uh, we see that the data is not flowed through the graphics application, right? All they give is the functional identifier, right? They won't give mostly the technical identifier, right? So the technical identifier is like, we see only in the MuleSoft layers on the underlying APIs, but mostly will give the business identifier. So what we did is we set the standard that um, we will keep track that business identifier we associate, right? Whenever we are writing the log or we are sending the alerts, right? We are keeping track of this business identifier, right? And we provide a mechanism for the testers or for the the product managers or business owners, right? um, the ability to search using the business identifier, right? I'll just show you in the next slide how are we extracting the business identifier and using that in the alerts, right? So these are the two dimension of the tracking we are doing, one through the transaction identifier and another through the business identifier, right? Then the when it comes to the logging strategy, I think most of us are aware, like there are multiple way to log a particular the transactions, right? We can create a custom connector, or we can use the JSON logger, right? um, or we can have a queue based implementation, right? Where we are instrumenting or pushing the message into the proper the transaction points. It depends on your organizational strategy and the enterprise wise strategy. It could be fit for my enterprise, but it may not be fit for your enterprise. But for us, the JSON logger worked really well, right? So the couple of reason is it's one, it's a kind of out of the box, and it has a ability to customize. We can just take the open source JSON logger, then we can customize according to our need. It provides the user interface for the developers, right, to instrument or provide the details what's supposed to be logged, right? So the what we are using is a JSON logger. We kind of customized. In the screen you see, like we have a custom structure, right? We are collecting the additional information whenever the user is logging a particular request, right? So as you are all aware, JSON logger has a multiple trace points, right? So what we call the trace point is like the point of logging, right? So for any API, right, so we have a beginning of the request and the end of the request. Then the API can make a call to some other APIs also, right? So before we call the API and after we call the API, right, then we may have to log some important milestones, right? So the JSON logger by default it comes with the multiple trace points, like the start and the end, beginning of the request and the end of the request, and before transformation and after transformation. We just the trace points, and what we wanted to make sure is like we define a particular standard through the C4E engagement. Um, we provide a guideline, right? So when you are developing any API, you may need to make sure that you need to create a log entry at the beginning and the end, before after you're making a request, before transformation or after transformation, right? And if there is any important milestone, right? Basically, when you look at the log, it should tell as a story, right? So then only multiple people, right, in a particular project, the transaction life cycle. We have a product managers, we have a business owners, then we have a developers, and we have a production support, right? So the log entry what we are creating, it should make sense, right, for all type of users, right? So we made sure that the data what we are collecting and the message what we are writing, right, it should talk in English, right? It's not like purely in the technical term. uh, I like the messages, and also we are collecting some additional details, right? So let me quickly go over the some of the data we are collecting whenever we are doing the logging, right? Uh, the main the detail we are collecting, it's not out of the box. It's the connector attribute, right? And we have a business identifiers, right? And we have a connector type, right? So these three are a kind of a key for us. In addition to the tags, this is also custom field. So this help us to slice and dice the the log and provide a multiple views, right? So we have executive view, we have a product owner view, and we have a developer view, we have a production support view, right? um, uh, with the help of other details like the location of the error, the timestamp, and the thread name. So these are all the out of the box. But whatever I just mentioned, the connector type and connector attributes, those are all custom stuff, right? So what is a connector attribute is like in MuleSoft world we have multiple connectors, right? Salesforce connector, we have HTTP connector, we have Anypoint MQ connector. So what we are trying to do is um, we wanted to log some of the attributes that used by the connector that helps us to trace, right? For example, in case of the Salesforce, if Salesforce is down, right, the first question the Salesforce team will ask, hey, can you provide the username what you are using, right? So that I can go and trace at my Salesforce system, okay, what's happening with this particular user, okay, what privileges this user has, right? Or something has been messed up with this user, right? um, Similarly, if you go with the HTTP connector, we are kind of collecting what is the path, right? What is the method, right? And what is the host name and the port name, so that what we can do, we can just by looking at the log itself, we don't have to go and dig into the code and see, right? We just look in the log, hey, this resource is failing, right? At the same time, if you collect the connector attribute, we can create a dashboard, right? With the dashboard, we can extract this detail and provide a like a production support view. Hey, the last 10 failures, right? These are all the URL, or the path, that has failed for last 1 hour or 5 hours or for 10 hours, right? We can provide that. And also, by collecting this connector attribute, we were able to, you know create a kind of a KPI. Okay, how many time we are hitting this URI, right? So how many time, we are, it's failed and it is success, right? So all those details, we are able to connect. Basically, these are all the data we are collecting whenever the user is, having the JSON logger, right? um, so some of the attributes over here, we are collecting automatically through programmatically. Some of the detail we are asking the user to populate. Whenever they started developing the API, the first step would to set some of the metadata, to provide some of the log context, right? For example, the application name, and what is the application version, right? And what is the business unit, right? So these are all, it's a kind of a preliminary configuration that's needed for all log trace points, right? So that we are actually asking the developer to set up. Then, the rest of this connector attribute, and the correlation ID, right? And what is the source system, and and the tags. So these are all, we are populating through programmatically, even the environment also. So, some of the information we are collecting, some of the information we are asking the user to provide in the very, in the form of the context. We are asking them to create a variable. So we have a standards. Okay, you should create a variable with a specific naming convention. So what we are doing, we are ingesting the data based on the custom variable, right? Then we are extracting the detail and we are pushing. So this is how, we customized, and we built our strategy around the logging. So our goal is like, the sufficient information should be collected, and the instrumentation should happen at the during the important milestones, like, start and end, before and after, right? uh, so that's our first step. Then, so once we have instrumented all those, the log trace points, the next step is, we define the strategy in case of error, right? um, how the error should be collected, and that should be sent to the Splunk, right? So that's what I'm going to share in the next slide. So before I move to the next slide, do you have any questions or some
Yeah, if you have
information you
any
need?
questions or any comments, or based on your experience, if you want to share something, please use the chat. So no, that way, no, we can keep track of who is asking, and we can respond back to you guys.
Okay, fine. So we have a question answer session, right, Ram? We can collect and we can answer in the last.
Yeah, we can let them start asking questions in the chat. We can look at them, go through them at the end. Once your presentation is done, we can go through that and try to answer. Or no, we can follow them. We can follow up later. So based on the
Okay,
time, yeah.
fine. Okay. So with respect to the error handling strategy, right? We created a, the utility called Fox Error Handler utility. So it's a jar-based utility, and it follows the standard that's defined by the MuleSoft. So what does the error handler utility do is, when we have created and bundled this utility as a jar, this will be added as a dependency to all the projects, right? We were using the Exchange and Artifactory, so that it can be self-served. Right? It can be searched and it can be used in the API. Right? So the developer, they just use this as the default error handler in the API. So we also have a template. So what we have done, okay, whenever any API has been created, like they have to use a template. So the template default come with this error handler and the JSON logger. So all they need to do is, like, they just need to create their flow, right? The rest of thing will be handled by the error handler, right? So all the primary configurations we are handling through the template, right? Um, so so any new developer, he go to the template, he creates a first project, and then he uses this error handler as a default error handler. We have a general configurations, right? So we'll add that. So in case of any error, okay, what does it do is, in case of on error, we have actually handling two type of errors. One is the error that has been generated by the asynchronous API and the synchronous API, right? Uh, so we are using the on error continue in case of asynchronous, and in case of synchronous, we are using on error. Sorry, in the other way, yeah, we're using on error continue in case of synchronous. In case of asynchronous, we're using the on error propagate, right? So the first step, what we are doing, um, we'll just ingest the error and we'll try to identify what is the error type, right? So based on the error type, we'll decide what is the status code and what is the default message, right? um, Once we identify that, the next step, we are reading the metadata from the custom error context variable, right? So the custom error context variable means, like, as I mentioned, for every API, we provide a guideline to the developer to provide some of the context of the API. And in whenever they are handling any error scenarios, obviously using the try catch, right, we are asking them to populate additional details about that specific, the uh, error, right? Then use the rise component to raise the error, right? So the first thing, we'll look into this error context variable and try to extract the detail. In most of the cases, the developer no need to populate this context, right? In that case, we'll use the default values, right? But if there is a specific business scenario, or the system error scenario that has been explicitly handled by the developer, we ask them to provide additional context about it. For example, if API is making a call to the target system, right? If the target system is failed, right, it's having some kind of a custom code, it's responding. So in that case, what we ask them, hey, you may have to capture the exact error that thrown by the target system, and you need to populate this into this context variable, right? um, so what we are doing in this common error handler, we are extracting the detail, right, and we are creating a log entry, right, using the Splunk, right? Um, we are using the custom JSON logger. So using the JSON logger, what we are doing, we are trying to push the log directly to the Splunk. Okay. So we are using the Splunk appender, and we are using the Cloud Up appender also in the JSON logger. There is option we can configure in the log4j. So whenever we create any log entry in the JSON logger, the log eventually push to the Splunk and the cloud up under, right? So just wanted to give a want to share on experience that if you are customizing the log4j, you must need to disable the cloud up log. Okay. With I think the default configuration, you won't be seeing that option to disable the cloud up log. You may have to raise a request to the MuleSoft support to enable that specific configuration. Right? Then only your logs will be forwarded to the Splunk. Otherwise, you won't. Even though you have a configurations and everything, your log will not be forwarded. Right? So disable log. You know. Uh, the MuleSoft will not hold the responsibility to write the log into the cloud hub, right? But we have an option in the log4j. In addition to the Splunk appender, we can use the cloud hub appender also. So in that case, even though we say disable cloud hub log, using the log4j, we are sending the log to cloud hub as well as to the Splunk, right? So in this step in the error handler, so we are using the JSON logger. After we extract the error details, we are making an entry. Eventually, the log entry will be pushed to the Splunk, right? So after we push the log entry to the Splunk, we are determining what is the type of the API. So how are we determining is based on the context, the custom error context variable. So if it is a synchronous, we are building the payload to respond to the consumer, right, with the appropriate status code. If it is asynchronous, we are just ending the flow, right? We are just propagating the error, and we are just concluding that flow. So that's what we are doing in the error handling strategy. So this was working really well for us, since we automated most of the errors, like API Git router errors, or any point connector errors, or Salesforce connector errors, right? So everything, we are handling. We have a map error, right? So we are populating the custom message, and so that the developer, uh, they don't have to explicitly worry about it. And we have 100 plus API, right? So um, this becomes like a standard format or unified approach across all the APIs. So it's easy for anyone to go and triage the issue, right? As a C4E, we may not be very closely working uh, with every project, right? So by setting a standards like this, we know that, okay, we told the project to write the error or log in a specific format. It is easy for me, right, to go and triage across the multiple projects, right? Even though I don't know the specifics of each implementation, we have a standard, so we are able to go and triage the error and trace the error. We are able to help the product owner or production support, right? And we are able to quickly resolve the error, and identify the root cause and fix it, right? So that's really working for us. This is how we are handling the errors using the common error handling approach. So the in the next slide, I'm going to just share how are we kind of ticketing and alerting, right? So as I explained, the two fundamental uh, part for ticketing and alerting is to extract the data, right, and capture it into the Splunk, right? So we use the JSON logger, and we use the error handling framework, right? Using the JSON logger, we are extracting the transaction details. With the error handler, we are extracting the error details, right? And using the correlation ID, we are tying together the whole transaction, right? So that was our first step. So once we achieve that first step, the next is um, to take the data and to create the dashboard or to perform the alerts and to create the ticket, right? So as an enterprise wide, we are using multiple products, right? I'm just going to explain that. We are using the MuleSoft, we are using the ServiceNow, and using the PagerDuty, right? Each product has its own specifics, right? So let me just go through how we are connecting together, right? So let me just do this. Yeah. Okay. So what are we doing is like once we get the data into the Splunk, with the specific format, we configured the Splunk alerts, um, like we are extracting the data, right? And we have some kind of a default dashboard. Since we have a specific format, um, we were using that, as I mentioned, we are using the two-dimensional tracing, right? So using the correlation ID and using the business identifiers, to search the transaction end to end across the multiple layer, we created a simple dashboard. It's based on the correlation ID and other instrumented data. We were able to search and the trace the instance, right? So in case of any exception, right? Um, like we use the error type to classify that as a business errors or a system errors. In case of business errors, we have um, you know we have a strategy, right? Not to ticket, we just need to send to the business people, right? So what we are doing is, say for example, MuleSoft API is throwing a business exception, right? So we are capturing that through the error handler, and we're using the JSON logger, and we are pushing to Splunk. Okay? In the Splunk, we configured the alerts, right? That alerts will be uh, looking for a specific error type. Okay. So we normally will follow like general business error, right? The error type. So the Splunk alert will extract the business error with the specific type, with the specific error code, and we will be triggering the Splunk, Slack alerts, right? So if you see here, we have defined a kind of a template uh, to trigger any business alerts, right? Because this business alert, directly go to the owners and the functional people. We don't want to put any technical details into it, right? So we have an option in the Splunk. We can customize the subject, and we can customize the body of the email, right? To provide the specifics, right, about the errors. So I provided the sample, the error message that we are triggering through the Slack channel. So if you see here, it just tells, okay, what happened, where it happened, what should I do, right? Why I'm receiving this notification. Then we have a tiny bit of information in the footer, right? So what is the error code and what from which application is triggering this issue. So the moment the business people or functional owner receive the Slack alerts, they are just going to contact us uh, with the ID what we provide with the error code. Then we were able to quickly identify and fix the error. Right? So initially, we were just using the structure, the custom logging structure. Then we got a feedback that, hey, what is this? It looks like we couldn't understand anything. It's purely technical. Then we circled back and we converted all this technical detail into the business friendly English message, right? Uh, so what we are doing is like we have a specific Slack channels, right? And in this Splunk, we are doing error code based routing, right? So we can do that in the in the multiple manner, like from the Splunk, we have an option to make a API call, or we have a direct integration to the Slack, um, or we can use the Slack channel's email ID, we can configure in the Splunk to send us an email, right? So initially we started with using the Slack channel email ID. The sample also it's showing that. Then later we kind of enhanced. We now directly integrating the Splunk with the Slack channel. So instead of the email ID, we can just provide a Slack channel name, right? Um, the format is going to be same, but the mode of communication, the error will be changed. Instead of the email structure, it's going to be the Slack message, right? In the case of business alert, we are not creating any ticket. Only we are just sending the Slack alerts, and the business people, they have a mechanism. They'll extract this Slack alert, and they'll create the Jira ticket, or they have a separate process defined to handle the business alert, right? So this is how we are handling the business exception. Um, in case of the system exception, um, so from this Splunk, as I mentioned, we have a specific query, a Splunk query, which extract the system exception based on the error type, right? And if the error type is system, then instead of we routing it to the Slack channel, we are routing it to a product called MuleSoft. Okay. So the MuleSoft, for the people, they are very new to the MuleSoft, right? Um, it has a more capability of deduplication. We can do the clustering. So why we need a deduplication and clustering is like, say, we have a API which makes a call to the Salesforce, right? The Salesforce is down, right? Um, uh, so what happens is, like, we may get thousands of transactions, right? When the Salesforce is down, right? We don't want it to create 1,000 ticket, right? So all we need to do is, we just need to create a one ticket, for the same type of error code. How do we achieve that, right? We can have a custom implementation, but it is easy doing the MuleSoft. So what we are doing is, we define the error type, right? Based on the error type, we have a configuration, we have a workflow in the MuleSoft. uh, it does the deduplication part, right? If the same error type is coming, if there is an incident has been created for that, then it will not create a new incident until that particular incident is closed. Okay. So just a little bit more about MuleSoft. For every MuleSoft alert, right, it creates the situation ID, and it has the detail of the timeline. Okay. For example, let's say it triggered a database error. Okay, the error type is db colon whatever, right? So if the database down, MuleSoft will be throwing thousands of the error alerts, right? So everything will be captured in the MuleSoft. Uh, MuleSoft will create the situation for that specific error code, right? And uh, first time when it gets that notification, it creates the ticket, and it actually stores that the ticket into the MuleSoft situation metadata, right? We have an integration between the MuleSoft and ServiceNow through API, right? So that MuleSoft knows, like, okay, the ticket has been created, is in process, or it's closed, right? I'll explain a little more about when I explain about the ServiceNow. So in the MuleSoft, we have a situation, and that situation has all the metadata, right? Okay, what is the instance ID, and when what is the timestamp when we first receive this particular error, after the first alert, okay, how many more alert has been created, right? What was the last alert timestamp? So all those details will be available in the MuleSoft, right? And MuleSoft, we can also create the specific the report, based on the applications, and we can do the slice and dice of the variety of metadata, right? So I don't want to go more deep into that. So at very high level, we are using MuleSoft for deduplication, right? We don't want it to create thousands ticket, so we are kind of grouping the alerts based on the error type. We are just creating only one ticket. So that's all about the MuleSoft. Uh, from the ServiceNow perspective, for the people who are new and who were not used ServiceNow before, so we kind of created the hierarchy in the ServiceNow. The hierarchy contain multi-level, um, you know, uh, configuration item. So the in ServiceNow we have two type of configuration item. One is the application configuration item, then we have operation configuration item, right? So it's a decision of the enterprise how they have to hierarchy, how they have to form the hierarchy. How we did it, we created one operation CI for every API, right? And we tied that operation CI into a application CI. So application CI is one level higher than the API. It's kind of groups the whole integration. For example, if you have a Salesforce application, right, and you created more than one API for the specific Salesforce application, right, you can create the application CI to group all underlying APIs, right? MuleSoft, what it does, it uses the API name, it identifies the operation CI, and it also identifies the associated application CI and creates the instant, right? So that's how it's connected. So the service now, we have created a dashboard, right, that based out of the application CIs to provide executive view of, okay, how many incidents created for this particular operation CI, right? And we have multi-layer of application CI, right? So we have a multiple support pillars. We can configure the hierarchy, right? Uh, yeah, application CI can contain more than one parent, an application CI. So it depends upon how you want to visualize operationally, right? And what is the strategy that defined by your executives, right? So you know based on the strategy that defined by the VPs, we define a model hierarchy, and we are pushing and creating the tickets based on that. Okay. So once we create the ticket, right, um, as a default from ServiceNow, we should be getting the emails, right? Hey, the ticket has been created under this particular application configuration. Just to tell, like, every application configuration has associated the support email ID. So the moment it creates the ticket under a particular application configuration, the email will be generated for the support email, right? uh, so what happened is, like, we we were able to receive the email, but we couldn't configure the escalation, or we couldn't redirect. If, say, the production support went on leave, we wanted to route that particular the alerts to a different production support who is on call, right? um, we don't have a sophisticated mechanism in the service now. So that's why we kind of I think there are options, but for our enterprise, we felt there's some limitations, so we started using the pager duty, right? So every application configuration item, we have associated pager duty entry, right? So the pager duty application, it lets us, it helps us to create the escalation policy, and we can configure the production support, um, the calendar, right? So okay, the first week so and so person, second week so and so person, like that. And we can configure the rotation. For example, um, okay, yeah, incident has been created, and we can configure the level 1 support group. If the level 1 support group did not acknowledged that request, then we configure a level 2, and we configure the escalation policy. Like, if level 1 did not responded in 30 minutes, we'll escalate to the level 2. If level 2 did not respond, then we kind of escalated to the level 3, right? We can configure, okay, we can do this escalation for the 5 times, then we can end it, right? So those type of escalations policies, we configure the pager duty. And if you see, this is the sample pager duty alert that has been triggered, generated, right, in case of any service or system errors, right? This is the whole ticketing and alerting strategy we kind of adapted. I understand, this may not be fit for everybody, but I see this may fit for most of the, our integration scenario. And in some places we don't need a pager duty, we can just utilize the service now. We can defend the production or on-call calendar, or if you have more advanced need of alerting, then we can go with the pager duty. Right. That's all I want to share from the ticketing and alerting strategy perspective. Um, yep. So Ram, do you have any few questions? We can.
Yeah. Please use the chat to ask any questions or any comments you have about this presentation. First of all, no, thank you, Shankar, so much for sharing your experience and sharing the way you have achieved operational excellence at Fox. Very impressive, and definitely it will be very useful for a lot of us. Everybody has a similar, or no, same or similar requirements. The only difference is, the tool set that we may not have no MuleSoft, we may not have Splunk. So you can substitute that with the tools of your choice, or know what tools you are using in your organization. But the conceptually, I think it helps really every different scenario. So thank you so much for sharing that. So please use the chat to share your comments, feedback about this presentation, or any questions before we wrap this up. And also, if you want to be the presenter in the next meetup or one of the coming meetups, please ping me. I will give my email address there. You can send me an email if you whenever you think you'll be ready to present in one of these meetups. It'll be very interesting. It'll be good to hear your perspective on things. So the meetups are really for the partners, customers, and the community. It's not driven by MuleSoft as a company. I may be from MuleSoft, but I think the point that I want to make is this is a community meetup, right? We want to hear from your experience. You may educate us on the things that you have done well, and things that work for you. Okay, question: how are you handling the authentication authorization between these applications?
So it's between the layers of the API, or can you please elaborate a little bit?
He says it's yes for that.
Okay. Okay. So basically, we have a strategy. Um, Between the layers, we are using the client credentials, authentication. Um, but when we expose any API in the to the external applications, we are using the OAuth. Right? So we have a Okta integration. So we are using Okta as a authorization server, right? Um, we'll create the client application and we'll use the client credential grant. We'll use the authorization URL. We'll use a two-leg process, right? So first we'll create the token, then using the token, we'll get the, we'll using the token, we'll make the actual API call. Right? So it's a OAuth two-leg for external application. Within the layers, we are using the client credential grant.
Any further questions?
Yeah, we need a API manager. We need to set the OAuth to policy. Um, you know, to protect our API. So one thing I want to share, in some cases, for example, if we create if we create any API for a webhook, we may not able to have any policies for the integration. In that case, we are using the IP whitelisting policy. Okay, using that.
This clearly shows with cloud-based application tools how efficiently we can implement monitoring and alerting strategy and working in real time. It's a good presentation. Yeah, I agree with that. Uh, it's definitely no. I think all these organizations now have various tools of choice, and it's how we use it like no to the we have to be innovative in coming up with a solution to use all these tools so that no we can elevate the experience working with these platforms. So it has to be developer friendly, it has to be operational friendly, so that no we get the best out of the system as well as be more efficient. There's one more comment from Yogaraj. I'm not exposing any API. My Mule app is consuming third-party API with OAuth. In this case, do I need API manager?
No, I don't think so. So only to secure your application, we need API manager. But for any outbound communications, we don't need API manager.
Sakif, I see you had pinged me sometime back. I just responded to that. If you're interested, you can present the Kafka integration in the next meetup. Ping me or let me know your email so that we can get in touch with you and we can plan for the next one. Awesome. If we don't have any other questions, we can wrap this up. Just wanted to make sure that we give back the time to the folks. If you have more questions, please. Oh, there is one more comment. Also, do you know the amount of time that has been reduced in troubleshooting these issues without your solution? That's a I think that's a good metric to have. Obviously, the purpose is to be efficient. I'm sure, Shankar, you have some KPIs that you have
Yeah,
defined. You were able to measure the efficiency that you gained with this solution.
right.
Any insight into that?
Yeah, usually, it'll take 4 to 6 hours, without having these solutions to identify the issue. But with these solutions, we were able to identify, at least we are able to find the root cause within 10 to 15 minutes. Uh, the biggest, the advantage is previously for any issues we need an architect, we need a developer, right? To browse through, they need to have access for our anypoint platform, right? And they need to know, okay, which API is causing the issue, right? We need more technical details, right, to triage the issue. But with the help of these kind of solutions, all we need to give is Splunk access to the production support. So without any intervention, they are able to identify the root cause, and they are able to create the preliminary report, right? So that's really helping us to identify the issue within 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. Impact of the solution that has yeah. So one thing, I would like to point out, this is definitely a team effort from all the layers of the means of integration, right? From the developer and from the tester, right? And from the operational support, right? Because it has a little considerable amount of development work, and we set up a process during the development and the testing, right? And we have a gate reviews, right? We are making sure they are following the standards, right? That's we would need a it's not just like we are using all this tool. We need to set up a process, right, to make sure it has been followed and it has to be tested. So we have a kind of a compliance gate review process, right? So based on that, we'll give a star rating. So if it is below that, we are not going to approve for production. So you may need to establish the backbone process, right, to take through the implementation across all this implementation.
Okay. Just curious about of this. As your transactions increase, any other new app integrations will this scale?
Yes, because all are like it's all microservices and the decoupled manner, right? We do not have any performance bottlenecks because all these are handled in the asynchronous manner, right? So there is no kind of the Splunk is not waiting. Sorry, the MuleSoft is not waiting until the message has sent to the Splunk, as well as the Splunk is not, waiting on the MuleSoft to ingest the same thing. MuleSoft is not waiting for, service now or something, right? So all are happen in the asynchronous and the distributed manner. With the multi-cloud architecture. So it's definitely it scales, so we don't have any issues with that. Thank you.
So, Shankar, is this a standard across all Fox projects or just your project?
Um, it, it is standard across our business unit.
Okay.
We have kind of a federated C4E model, right? We kind of federated from the enterprise, since across enterprise there is a little bit challenge on implementing, that our enterprise team is taking care. But with the our business group, we kind of enforcing the standard.
Okay.
And this has been evaluated by the enterprise group. And we are in the process of suggesting this across other business groups as well. Since as of now, in our organization we are the major consumer. So the in the rest of groups, right, they are not having much APIs. But we wanted to set this as a standard, as we go, right? So as we go, whenever the new business groups getting onboarded, we wanted to do it. For
Okay.
existing business groups, they have some challenge, to retrofit whatever they have done. So now we are in the process of, for any new projects, we want to implement this.
Okay. Thanks. Any other questions, guys? Okay, in that case, I will stop recording. And thank you so much, Shankar, once again. The
You're welcome.
recordings will be available on the meetup site itself. If you go to the event, that's where you will see. Yeah, certainly. No, it makes sense to come up with a solution. I'm sure we can standardize on a solution and offer it to the customers, but it also varies based on the tool set that you have. To some extent, it can be customized, and we do that actually as part of other initiatives like metrics framework, and wherever it makes sense, we package them accelerators and other templates that we create. They are probably they fall into the same category. We want to help with customer adoption. We want to make it easy for implementing solutions. You don't want to reinvent the wheel every single time. So all these are common requirements for any integration, any organization, so that it makes perfect sense for companies, for the product companies to come up with a solution and package it and offer it to the customers. So yeah, I will take it, take this feedback, and we'll see what we can do in the error handling strategy, logging strategy. Also, we do have some frameworks, but it's not widely adopted or shared with customers as one standard. We have many flavors. Different professional services works with different customers. They come with different patterns, different solutions, and we do share it with other, reuse it. But it makes sense to think about this. Thank you for the suggestion. All right, I'm going to stop recording, guys, and